So how do we measure culture? Performance linked values is the outcome of culture, and hence the right value systems could propel the right performance and so on and so forth, which means that if you have certain values which are not linked with it, the performance would dip accordingly, and hence culture becomes very important. I'm sure all of us have heard about Peter Drucker's famous quote, culture eats strategy for lunch, which means that you can have a brilliant strategy, and if the culture of the organization is not right, it might not get executed in the way you would have liked it to be. Great leaders have spoken about it, great people have commented about it, and its impact is not only for the organization, it is for any kind of group behavior. So exactly what are the prime or the basic core of culture? So as I mentioned, it's the values. So values depend and decide upon exactly what would be the performance. Hence, to give you a very utmost respect to co-workers is one of the values practiced by most of the Japanese firms, and hence it's a part of the Japanese culture, both in the social and in the organization spirit. So hence, if we have the right kind of value systems, we would be able to deliver the right kind of performance which is expected of us. So when we say right kind, what do we mean? See, we have to understand that values itself are not constant at every point in time. So when you're hungry, you're looking at what are your values of hygiene, consumption of food, your health concerns, right? Like someone may say that, okay, I'm absolutely very clear that I would not have processed food, or I would not have processed sugar. So it then becomes a part of their hygiene practice, and then what happens is, like in certain organizations, you'll notice that in certain organizations, food becomes a very big part of the culture. Like some companies do not offer non-vegetarian foods. In certain workplaces, vegan food is celebrated, so on and so forth. So it basically stems from values. So the kind of values that you practice get imbibed into the culture of the organization. So where do these values come from? All values are the result of your belief system. So what we believe is, and hence imbibe as a belief system within us, ends up forming the basis of our acquired or attributed values. So now that we understand that it is the belief system which drives it, what are the sources of these belief systems? So there are three sources of these belief systems. The social values, which means what, since growing up within a particular society, we would gather a particular kind of a culture. If we have lived across multiple societies, we would have gathered all those value systems which are prevalent in those multiple societies. And hence, whether we grow up as being what we call as conservative versus liberal would be defined by our experiences, our social experiences. The second is, of course, through experiences, right? So while certain value systems come from society, certain come from experiences within those societies, because no society is equal. So you do have socio-economic structures, you do have financial levels and hierarchies, and you could also sometimes have gender-based hierarchies. So based on that, what happens is that your experiences start creating or setting up in your mind a certain set of value systems, beliefs, which then get translated into value systems. And the third comes from learning, right? So most of our cognitive value systems, like say for example, the respect we would give to a logical or a mathematical. So if someone says that mathematically 2 plus 2 is 4, whether you would believe in that or you would cross argue on it would be based on what is the kind of learning belief system that you have acquired. So now that we have understood that, okay, they come from this, how do we exactly practice it? So at the workplace, what happens is that it is not that there is one single prevalent culture. Yes, there could be pieces of values which are common and prevalent. What do we call them? We call them the core values at the organization level, right? So you could have core values of, say, respect, risk-taking, passion, transparency, safety, right, as the core values. But that doesn't mean that there would not be segmented values at different workplaces. Depending on what the particular department or the task requires, one could be extrinsically motivated, so being an influencer. One could be intrinsically motivated and be an action, profess a lot of action-driven values, which become very important for that particular task or set of tasks practiced by the department. One could also be hygiene and intrinsically driven, which is through intellect. And finally, one could be extrinsically driven and also hygiene driven, which is social. So basically, what are these hygiene, motivation, and intrinsic versus extrinsic? So we have to understand that whenever we are professing certain values, we profess those values for two reasons. Sometimes we profess them for our own greater good, which is for self preservation and self growth purposes. Certain times we could do it for basically attracting it from the society or trying to impress upon society a certain value. Right? Like say for example, when we say that okay, we are very liberal with the children, it's more of what I would call an extrinsic value system and an extrinsic hygiene based value system. So which is more social driven, which means we want to show to the society that being much more liberal with your kids, allowing them multiple choices, is the right attitude or the right value system that one wants to practice or needs to practice. So hygiene based value systems are those value systems which you would need irrespective of the performance requirements, which means like in a car, however fanciful the car is, you would still need a good set of tires to run the car. Similarly, hygiene factors are factors like transparency, safety, good lighting. These are bare minimum requirements irrespective of the level of talent and the capability of the individuals or the team. So those are hygiene factors. Motivational factors are factors which propel one to do certain things on their own, right? And which is why you see all these motivational gurus keep talking about getting ourselves motivated, right? Because it's individualistic, it is more focused towards doing it yourself, and it propels a lot of action. Right? Now this action could be of two types. So one is people who are more intrinsic would use motivation to do certain things themselves, whereas some other people who may not have the capability to execute things would like to rather tell the world or help the world do certain things, right? So if you look at the one set of coaches versus sports people, the coaches are helping others, so they are the influencer group who are motivated, and hence they are teaching the teams or academics who help teach the teams to go out and execute. Leadership also falls in this quadrant. So which means all leadership should be based on extrinsically motivated value systems. So now that we have understood that okay, different departments would need different set of value systems to profess. It's good to understand that whether they are actually doing it. How do we do it? We call it the AISI framework. So A stands for action, I for intellect, S for social, and again I for influence, which means that are my departments a healthy mix of all the AICI factors, or where I require high action oriented, or what we call as the do it attitude, do I have it vis-a-vis, say for example, a research oriented department where I would rather prefer to have a more of an intellect attitude or more of a learning attitude. All right. So once we can measure this, then what we can do is we can start looking at how do we change or bring about reinforcement of the selected values. Now here we have to keep one thing in mind, is that it is not very easy to transform people as far as their value systems are concerned, because they do not happen overnight, right? Unless of course it's an experiential, and most of the experiences, unless they are very positive, would lead you to a quick switch of values. Otherwise it would take a long time for the value to get switched or the value to get adopted. IC factors or AISI factors within each department, that could tell you exactly where the scale should be versus where you are currently. Now some may say, okay, how do I know what should be the right scale? The right scale can very easily get determined by understanding the difference in the scale between what we call as the performers versus the laggards, right? So when you look at the performers level of values versus the laggards level of values for a particular value, you know exactly what should the right scale do to be. So how do we correct this scale? See, as I said, that values are not something which can be transformed overnight. It cannot be taught. It can only be changed through experiences, and hence that kind of a learning is very rare across the globe, leave aside India. So there are very few trainers who actually have that capability to bring up a lot of the training that we are trying to imbibe to chimps, to baboons, to rats, and notice the differences. And this has been going on for many years, right? Now, one of the ways we do it is, of course, in the Montessori educational system, where we try to reinforce a particular behavior and reward a particular kind of a behavior to imbibe and influence and ensure that we find more of that behavior coming in. In fact, the rewards and recognition system within organizations looks at reinforcing the kind of what we call as positive behavior. So hence, we have to understand that these factors become very important, and hence measuring their levels and their contributions across departments becomes very important. The other way to fix it is to exactly fix it right at the door. We do not, or we often underestimate the importance of good hiring practices. And in fact, it would be very rare to find organizations who look beyond talent, who look beyond skills and look at these factors. Why do we do it? Okay, somewhere we as trainers and coaches and people who understand this subject are also to be blamed. We have often neglected the importance of these factors because we often come across organizations saying, I'm sorry, Ruben, we really wanted to do this, but we don't have a budget. And this budget limitation often makes us focus only on what looks deceptively important on the outward reality of things. But when we look a little deeper and see that even after all those good practices, changes are not happening or things are not improving, that's when we come and realize the importance of factors like culture and values. So if we can get this right at the hiring stage, if we can pick up the right guys with the right kind of value systems right at the hiring stage, we would do ourselves a great lot of service and helps reduce what is the outcome of culture. So I'll hold on my thoughts still here, and I will await to hear your thoughts on this. Please do write to us at score@pexetics.com, or feel free to reach out to us, visit our site pexitest.com, and do not forget to let in your views by writing in the comments below, so that we can come up with more inputs in the further episodes. I would of course request you to look at part 2, which of course should be available soon, where I will talk about the measurement practices and how to do that in the correct way, so that you are able to create the right cultural perspective for your organization to vroom forward. Thank you and see you soon.